Hello and welcome to a special video. As you may have seen the boring balance and unfunning of MechWarrior Online recently, and it's gotten a lot of traction. It's gotten just over 5,000 views as I look at it here on YouTube, and it is number 6 in top voted on Outreach HBG of all time. And with me here today is Mech the Dane and Val to talk about the video, the topics discussed in it, and to go into a bit more detail about it, what they're trying to do with sort of this movement, and why I'm here is just trying to signal boost, give them a platform we can talk about it and go into a bit longer type video as we have some random gameplay footage in the background as we talk about these topics. So, pass it off to you guys to introduce yourself. Mech the Dane.
I'm Dane. I've been playing this game forever. I've been a member of the community forever. Everybody should know me by now. I wear a hat sometimes. I make videos that are different than some other videos you might get. But generally I try to have fun, because if I'm not having fun, then why would I be making a video? But this is more important than me, though. We have Val here.
Hey guys, I'm Val. I've been a member for not quite forever in the MWO community, but I've worked a lot in the backgrounds with a lot of different units, done a lot of competitive stuff with Ryzen and Vito and some other AP and NA teams, and I've played this game for almost as long as Dane, and I gave him a hand to put together all the notes and things for the video that he had done.
So Val doesn't get a lot of press. Maybe that's by choice, or maybe he's just unlucky. But
mostly by choice.
he does a ton of work on the back end, like he like when it comes to competitive things, for instance, he makes all the real kind of hard decisions, and he's the one that's coming up with a lot of the best plans. But when it comes to this game and balancing and understanding it, which has a relationship to competitive play, because you're trying to milk the most out of the game as you can. He's really good. He and Terragato are constantly going back and forth and discussing things and kind of winnowing them away. And like Terragato, everybody sees and hears about. He's very proactive in the community, but I think he would agree certainly that Val's just as important as him in formulating a lot of these things that Terragato puts out there and that we put out there.
Yeah,
me and Taro speak a lot about his. That's okay. I was going to say, me and Taro speak a lot about all the things he posts and come up with things together in some instances as well.
And I was just going to say it's unfortunate he wasn't able to join us tonight, and
it is.
Maybe at some time in the future we can have another future conversation where maybe after a PGI's response we can discuss that. But let us get into it. So you did make this video, and it's just a little over 5 days ago at the time of this recording. And really, why did you make this video? What was your goal for putting it out there?
Well, I've made videos before, often in, sometimes they're to pump up Isengrim, sometimes they're about, I've made a lot of MRBC videos trying to keep the community apprised of what's going on. And I've made a couple of balance videos as well. I think I've made 3 really total, so it's not like a regular thing I do, but just because I've kind of created this place where I do make videos, if something like really bugs me, or if I feel like something really needs to be said or broadcast, I can put it all together with the help of Val and Terragato and put it out there, because I feel like sometimes, especially like with Terragato, you'll see it on the forums on Reddit. He'll put together like a 10-page thesis statement on why this element of the game doesn't work as well. And I mean, you get some viewership on Reddit, but on on the forums, like, that thing just sinks, like it's gone, and people don't bother reading it. They don't understand it, or they just don't. I mean, they just don't agree with it. Yeah, and it is just gone. It's just swallowed up in the brown sea and the swamp. And with the video, it's a lot easier to reach people. It's a lot easier to get these same concepts across. And so if we feel like there's something really important or something that really needs to be said, then I might just, with their help, come together and make a video. And that's what we felt like. This was an occasion where something needed to be said.
Yeah, and the something needed to be said. You brought up several specific topics in your video, namely things like rescale, the skill tree, engine desync. I was wondering if you wanted to maybe talk about those particular topics. Why are they an issue currently in your mind? And maybe expand upon them?
Sure. So a lot of the reason why I brought this up in the first place, what I was seeing was just on I want to say my level of just engagement with the game, with my community, was my unit mates, people I play this game with, they didn't want to play it anymore. I had people around me, different people, different ages, coming from different places, who just were playing other games, and that's what it really was. And they didn't feel motivated to get on and play this game. They didn't feel like this game had anything or offered anything for them anymore at this moment. And I don't like that. I want them to play this game. I want them to have fun. I want there to be a vibrant community here. And the reality was, I realized I wasn't playing this game very much anymore. And when I would get on it, like I'd play one or two very samey mechs, and I was just trying to figure out, like, why weren't we playing this game anymore? What was happening? Was we just playing it too long? Have there been changes? What was going on? And so I started asking my players. I started looking around. I started checking the forums. I started checking Reddit, just seeing what people were saying. And I realized what they were saying is what everyone was saying, and that was that. What it boils down to was what it wasn't fun anymore. They weren't getting the same level of joy that they once got out of this game from the unique aspects that this game brings to the players. That's one of the reasons why we've been playing this game for so long, is you really can't get the MWO experience anywhere else. And I guess it wasn't fun anymore.
Yeah, that is true. The experience of Mech Warriors quite different from other shooters that are on the market.
That was sad.
And I mean, looking from my perspective, and first I will just say that going into mine and Dane's perspectives on things is all well and good. I think that the important thing to remember is that we keep a generally a broad goal, which is to make the game fun again and get people engaged in the game and having fun with the game. You might disagree with 10 or 20% of what me and Dane are saying, and everyone's going to disagree on a different 10 or 20%, and then our message sort of gets degraded and fragmented up. So I'd like to touch on those three things you mentioned, which was the rescale and the skill tree and the engine desync, because I feel they were all fantastic ideas in principle, and people were very hopeful when they were going to be done, and yet somehow they all missed the mark, at least from my perspective, and I'm pretty sure from Dane's perspective as well.
I can corroborate that as well. Several things that have occurred have been, great ideas, but lacking in implementation.
Yeah, that's the overarching theme, implementation. The rescale was the first one. I mean, it really hurt light mechs, especially those 35 tonners. And being, I love my light mechs. I've probably got about 40% playtime in them across the 12 or 14 seasons I've been playing, and it just the 35 tonners were just gutted. Jenner's, one of my favorite mechs, was gutted. The 2Cs were gutted. Wolfhounds only really regained popularity again when the mega quirks came out. When you take their armor quirks off them, and I don't think many people will play them again. There were a few key mechs that needed a rescale, but instead of focusing on those couple, they went and did it across every single mech in the game. And there were some big winners like the Catapult and Quick Draw, but it just removed a fun element for me, which was light play.
All right. So on the topic of rescale, Dane, you want to add anything on that before we?
Well, I mean, it just comes back to a theme we're gonna run into a lot here. Is that is PGI implementing something and then just kind of walking away from it. The rescale, they did it. They made some decisions on how they're going to do it. The voluministic rescale that ended up hurting these 35-ton lights a lot. Like I doubt you could find a light player who ran those 35-ton mechs before and ran them after who wouldn't have something to say about that wouldn't have been disgruntled by that decision. And that's something PGI could have looked at. They could have made a change there. They could have said, all right, so we did this. We see some good things happening up here with these other mechs, so let's go back to these mechs and maybe tweak them a little bit more, and so that they're playable again. And they didn't. And those mechs have pretty much been dead ever since, except for the Wolfhound that got mega quirked. But that's just it's not fun, That is, tweak it.
Like, I'm totally agreeing with what you're talking here. There was a lot of mechs that were vastly oversized. Like, I think the Catapult is the perfect example. You compare it to the previous size of it compared to the Stalker, and where there was that full rescale of everything. Maybe a solution to that would have been more of a targeted rescale with some liberties taken of saying this is improperly scaled if you look at it, perfect volume, but considering these reasons, we're not going to do it. Would that have been a better way forward with that rescale?
I think some artistic license should be given, because at the end of the day, it is a computer game. You're talking about robots that, if they were moving at that speeds, would probably fall over and trip over their own feet anyway. Like, I think you're allowed a little bit of artistic license and flair and allowed to. I don't think they should have followed the volumetric scaling to the decimal point. I think they should have played with that a little bit more and shifted those lights and made them a little bit smaller and kept them more playable in a gameplay type sense.
All right. Say, moving on to the next major topic, which would be skill tree. And
skill tree is probably what I've gotten the most pushback on. I mean, I think still the vast majority of people who responded to my video have all agreed with me, but there has been a minority who agree with me with everything but skill tree. And as I say in my video, I liked the idea of skill tree. I wanted them to progress beyond the mastering a leading system they had previously that really needed some work. But we just come back to where we came with rescale, and that is it needed more refinements. The rescale, or not rescale, the skill tree needed more refinements. They needed to, after releasing it, come back to it and learn from what they've done, learn from how the community was engaging with it, and make it better, make it more usable. I don't think there's a good reason not to just cut the nodes in half. I think the majority of the nodes do such a small fraction of a change that if you just had less nodes and less skill points, you could, no one's putting like one node into one fraction of like a turn ratio. I mean, they're either going all in with that or they're going all in with something else. No one's putting like 1 point into a jump jet vent. Yeah, if they want a crazy jump jetting mech, they're putting a bunch of points into it. And so I feel like there's a tedium they could have just removed right there. I also think beyond that, there's just I know people disagree with me. This comes into the argument that you're going to run into between competitive play, casual play, quick play, community warfare. Like, are these really different things, or are they not? And I mean, I feel, and I think there's evidence for there being a clear meta in the skill tree, which means that you're basically never taking certain skill tree paths, and so that's not a balanced way to do skill tree. If basically whole trees are being ignored for 99% of the time. But at the same time, I don't think skill tree is the hill I want to die on here. If PGI doesn't want to touch skill tree, if they wasted enough time on it, they're done with that product, then whatever.
I mean, but even just getting back to the implementation, like there's a lot of user-friendly, I guess, changes they could make that don't change the skill tree at all, but just make it more user-friendly and more easy to interact with. Even like something simply as clicking your mouse and then dragging it along the nodes to make your path, so you can just wave your mouse through and in 2 seconds you're done, instead of having to click on each individual node. And then when you do that, if you're not quick enough, like you can accidentally drag the skill tree a little bit and it doesn't select the nodes, you got to go back. And there's some things for the user interface that on not changing the skill tree at all, just changing the way it interacts with the player, that they can make it more user-friendly, convey the information in a better way to a new player. I must imagine that like all the historic XP and Mech XP and general XP and the way that all interacts, and you have to add skill points to your mech, it must be very confusing at first. I know I was confused at first when it was introduced. I think there's a lot of things they could change on the user interface just to make it better. But it comes back to that same thing we touched a little bit on in the rescale, is they do something, they think it's good enough, and they're happy with it, and they leave it, and they don't touch it. And that's exactly what's happened with the skill tree. They introduced it. The next month, they added a couple of flamer nodes and changed the UAC nodes a little bit, and then, okay, that's done. Don't touch it. We're happy with it. That's good enough. Instead of being great, instead of being optimized, instead of listening to player feedback for user interface and I guess overall happiness of using it, it just gets pushed to the side. I think that's what one of the main messages throughout the video and that we want to convey is that things just get pushed to the side, and it's not gone back and looked at and adjusted. At least from my perspective anyway, there's some very simple things they can do that would alleviate a lot of the complaints from the skill tree. Do you agree with that, Kenna?
Yeah, I do agree with that. I remember making a video around when that came out, describing the different types of XP, and this is like basically how you, like, these are all the different things you need to know in order to use it. And it was complicated to make that video, and it probably shouldn't be. And what you're describing there, having things like being able to drag down, those are just quality of life improvements that, yeah, those would make the skill tree much easier to work with. They have said, although this is more of like a fleeting, we're thinking about this sort of thing, that they would look into maybe the ability to save and load skill trees, which would be amazing if they implemented it, but there has been no further communication about that topic since that first sort of like, maybe we could do that mentality.
Yeah, quality of life was the term I was looking for that I just couldn't quite find. And there could be a lot of quality of life improvements, if nothing else. You're right, 100% right.
Mm-hmm.
Now that doesn't necessarily, have a 1-to-1 ratio with, fun in the game, obviously. That's more like, that's quality of life. That's a, we're dropping, we're having some fun. Let's try out some weird mechs. Okay, I haven't used this mech in 3 years. Let me pull it out. Oh, but now I got to do the skill tree, and that's just like,
yeah. Can you wait 5 minutes thing?
Yeah, the new players may not quite grasp that either. They might only have a handful of mechs, and it might not be a big deal to them. And I can completely understand that. But when you've got a mech bay full of 200 mechs, and I'm only currently playing probably 15 of them, just because the tedium of having to go through and set everything up is too much. It's quality of life goes a long way to retaining a player base, in my opinion.
Yeah, I have 150 or so on my main account, and there's several of them that I haven't touched yet in terms of leveling out with the skill tree. I just sort of, when I want to play a mech, I'll be like, oh, I guess I have to skill it now.
Well, and then the other thing too with that is it takes longer to skill a mech up, or if you're starting without like what we have, those historic skill points or whatever, that we just fill them up with because we have trillions of them. But if someone ran out of them, if like we've had players who inadvisedly sold all of their modules, and they got nothing back, so now they have to reskill their mechs, and often it seems to take longer than it used to get your mech fully skilled up.
Yeah, I actually ran the numbers on that back when they were doing the skill tree testing, and what the old system was, of course, you had the set of 3 that you needed to get to fully master and all that such. The amount of experience they would take to do a single mech under the old system is less than it takes to do a single mech under the new system. But then there's the argument you don't have to do 3, so therefore it's less in total than having to level 3 mechs under the old system. But it does end up being longer time invested per mech when trying to level it out.
Yes.
And so for us, and this is again not an issue that maybe hurts a casual player very often, but especially if you're being competitive or you're trying to come up with build decks and say like CW or something that are very specialized, and so we need to use this mech. Does anybody have it? It's not unusual to have someone go that, oh, I have this mech but I haven't mastered it, or I'll buy this mech because I take this similar role usually, and this is a new mech or something. And then that person has to they have to master it, or now they'd have to skill it up. And if they don't have any of that skill tree, that just adds on to the grind for that player to get that mech ready for what we want to do. Which, that's a first world problem, I guess. But they get annoyed.
But video games are an entirely first world problem when we're complaining about them.
Yeah. But we don't need to spend too much time on skill trees. As I said, it's not the hill I want to die on. Like if PGI is unwilling to touch it, if it's done and enough people like it, that's okay. That's not why we're not playing anymore. It's not because of skill tree. It's skill tree's part of the problem, but it's probably not the main problem either. The real thing that's keeping us away from it, which I probably get into next to my video, is nerfs.
Well, let's get into that topic. What about the nerfs that have happened?
So the philosophy of PGI since skill tree released, it maybe, when was it, Val? Were they doing it before or after skill tree?
It happened around the energy rebalance, I guess. That's my level of knowledge, and I have to go back and look. But it's to me, it's been the last 6 to 8 months, maybe the last 9 months or so.
And since then, it has felt like PGI's answer to imbalance in the game is to nerf everything, and it makes it unfun. So why does it do that? Well, it makes certain weapon systems, it makes certain play styles no longer viable. And so let's say you loved to Pop-Tart. You like to jump up and down in a medium mech. It doesn't even have to be a Niger. Let's say a Nova or a Hunchback 2C A, and you're shooting your PPCs off, and that's your favorite play style in the game. I think there was definitely a time, and you probably remember this, in like 3 years ago when Pop-Tarting was out of control. It sucked. I like Pop-Tarting, but during that time period when the Highlander and the Victor and the Cataphract were doing it, and that's all you would see in competitive matches, like it was that
Cataphract 3Ds and the Victor Dragon Slayers, and it was nothing but Goss Pete and Goss AC5 Pop-Tarting.
Yeah, it was the Pop-Tarts were dominating gameplay, similar to how Clan Laser Vomit is dominating gameplay now.
And I felt like just recently, though, before the nerfs, you would run into Pop-Tarts. Pop-Tarting was viable, but it wasn't dominating it in the same way it was before. and at the same time you had SRMs, and this is the timeline in my video, but about 6-8 months ago, a little bit before that, right before skill trees released, you have SRMs that are also very viable in the game, but they're not dominating it either, and there just felt like there was a pretty good balance going on, and you could play either any of these styles, and you could perform very well in them, and they've nerfed them all. They've nerfed these play styles. So now if you get into your pop-tarting Nova, maybe, if you're lucky, if your stars align, you can have a pretty okay game, but you're not going to make a difference. Like, you're not going to, if you're a good player and you're playing it well, the changes you're going to make aren't going to be significant enough to, like, make the winds of fate for your team blow in a different direction. Maybe your team's just going to stomp them anyways, and you have a fine game. Maybe it's really close because of other reasons, and you do okay. But you lose the ability, because this is what it comes to, because people are going to be able to play these either way. People are going to still be running these PPC mechs. People are going to be dropping these DACA mechs. People are going to be running SRM Brawl mechs. And they're going to have success with them because, in quick play, if people have all different skills, what your team's going to do, are they going to split up? Are they going to run away? Are they going to, go shut down in a corner because someone's having a brain aneurysm? Like, anything can go. And so, in a sense, they all have functionality at that level, but it's not enough to sway the flow of the game. Yeah, Val?
I was just going to say it's important to note as well that the viability of all the different weapon platforms and playstyles isn't just through direct nerfs. A lot of it has been through indirect changes as well, like a lot of mechs getting a bunch of extra structure and armor through the skill tree, which then sort of changes how quickly a brawl mech can destroy the ones they get close and how much damage they take coming in. And what else? And even the speed changes, but like, most people, I won't say most people, I'll say some people don't necessarily skill out the mobility tree and the skill tree, which means they don't get speed tweak. I feel in general, the speed of the mechs across the game has gotten slower. Even the light mechs, you see Wolfhounds running at that 130, 135 mark instead of the old 145s, and I think just all the speeds of the mechs have dropped in the game. Everything's got more armor and structure, and so on top of that, and then on top of all the weapon nerfs, everything interacts, and it's. I don't just want to say it's been a direct like nerfed all the weapons, and that's why it's only weapons. There's been lots of changes to the game, and the engine desync with the agility changes means that your brawlers can't twist off damage as well, and there's been a lot of changes to the game that have made a lot of playstyles invalid, and it's all of them coming together and converging at this time that has given us the current problem. At least from my perspective, that's how I see it.
Like a notable example that I can think of is my Timberwolf. Well, this might be more of an entirely engine desync conversation, which we could get into next, but it just feels weird compared to what I had played a long time ago, where I'm just like, I don't feel like I can brawl in this anymore.
Oh, you really can't. Like, if you go into one-on-one, which we've done with that Timberwolf, you can have a Mad Dog, or really any mech that's that speed, just can run circles around the Timberwolf. The Timberwolf can't turn fast enough to fight it, and I mean, these are two heavy mechs that are fighting, and that's directly related to desync. That's killed the Timberwolf as far as a brawler, because you can't hold on to your target. You're gonna lose unless they just run at a straight line from you or stand still. You can't stay targeted on them. They're gonna get behind you, and then they're gonna stay there.
I mean, so some of it might just be a balance of power shift as well to other mechs, but I don't think other mechs, to me, in my experience of playing, it's not like the Timberwolf has fallen and a bunch of other mechs have risen. Some other mechs have risen, but it's all been from the same play style, and all these changes converge together to prop up and make one play style the most viable, and I feel it's taken away a lot of choices. So I don't want to get too like hooked up on one mech in particular. I know there have been some winners, but to me, there's been a lot of losers, and a lot of play styles have missed out, and aren't as viable as they used to be, and just can't compete or just aren't the best at doing what they do once they get in range as well.
And it's just also, like you said, the fun of running those particular ones that they had before may have been removed because of a change.
Everyone gets enjoyment from the game through different styles, and so I think it's very important to maintain the enjoyment across all all the ways you can arm your mech. And to me, and I think again that's where the Dane's video reached out and was able to engage with so many people, is because they all feel they might not all agree on this, like they might not use all the same platforms or the weapon platforms, they might not all play the same way, but they all feel that the play style has been reduced and that it's pushed them into one style of mech.
I mean, we can, like me or Val here, we could drop in a laser vomit Ebon Jaguar, and we could pretty easily get 1,000 damage games.
Almost
I would say,
game.
Yeah, it's not hard. I mean, that's just the reality. But if I dropped in mechs I used to enjoy or styles I used to enjoy, if I tried to brawl in a brawl mech, it's probably not going to happen. I'm looking at a 400 to 500 game, unless the stars align and my team does whatever and it works out. Same with the PPC mech. And PPC, the two Pop-Tart mechs, I always specifically am thinking of the mediums when I talk about it. You know, they are they're a very much of an overtime mech. When you drop in a Pop-Tart Nova or a Pop-Tart Hunchback or something like that, you shoot kind of slowly, and it's just kind of over time. You're kind of hot. It basically, to have success in that kind of mech, you have to be doing damage for the entire match. Like from the start to the finish, you are shooting at every single opportunity. And if you do that, that's how you get big games in those mechs. That's how you are successful. However,
by the constant nerfs to the cooldowns of those PPCs, that they've reduced the amount of chances you have to fire in the same time period in a game. I don't feel the games are going any longer or any shorter. The average game length, I feel, is roughly the same. They've just reduced the amount of time that the PPCs can fire in that game time.
Yeah.
And then, oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. You go ahead.
I was gonna say, and then the mechs gonna also be slower or more sluggish, so you're less maneuverable. You can't get out of a sticky situation like you could in those mechs before, because if a light gets on you, or if brawler or laser vomit pushes on you, you're not gonna be able to win a 1-to-1 fight. You have to fall back somewhere and then be sneaky, and that opportunity's been taken away as well. And then the mechs you're shooting at, as we mentioned before, also are likely healthier. And so the damage you are doing is reduced, and the impact it has is reduced, and your ability to escape is reduced. And that's how you get that perfect storm of that Pop-Tart isn't viable anymore. And then like SRMs, SRM missiles now spread more. And so the mech running the SRMs are slower, so that's more time in the field for them to get shot at. And then you have convergence on the lasers. So that's another thing too that really powers laser vomit.
That wasn't a topic you had managed to get into your video, if I don't remember.
Yeah, I didn't. We didn't bring that one up.
That's a tricky one. And to me, it feels like PGI have done what they can to try and reduce pinpoint damage. They desynced the Gauss and PPCs, and now we're getting to nitty-gritty stuff. And I just want to remind people again, you might be in favor for some of these changes, and I might be in favor for some of them as well. And we're all going to disagree on little points here and there, but I think it's important to keep the message cohesive, and that we want to enable as many different play styles as possible to keep the game fun. But getting to like Gauss PPC type stuff, and PGI have really tried to reduce the amount of pinpoint damage that's capable from a mech, so that way mechs don't lose components instantly, they don't get one shot, and I guess generally increase time to kill on mechs, which they've kind of done in most weapons platforms. They've separated Gauss and PPC out, so you've only got 30 point alphas. They've made the spreads on the SRM4s, then on all Artemis SRMs. They've made the spreads much wider. MRMs have introduced, they've become popular, but they've got a large spread on them as well. So they're able to reduce pinpoint damage and make the spread of weapons all greater, except for clan lasers, which because of power creep and more mechs that come out, they have more energy hard points, and all the lasers focus on that same point. So if you've got good aim, you can one-shot a mech through the CT if he's standing still or you're a good shot and can track. And there's not much they can do about reducing the pinpoint on lasers. So then they start trying to reduce cooldowns and lengthen beam times, but lasers are very problematic in that way. And again, everyone's got their own opinions on how lasers should be changed and fixed, and I don't want to go too much into it, but lasers with their convergence is probably one of the larger issues, and I don't know if PGI has a great way to deal with it other than continually nerfing the cooldowns on these lasers. We saw the energy rebalance around halfway through last year. I think it was May or June. I think it was a June patch.
Yeah, it was a June patch. I just looked it up here.
Yep. So when the June patch came out, they reduced cooldowns on a lot of the lasers, tweaked the beam times and stuff a little bit, tweaked the DPS on a lot of those shorter range lasers as well. Like the clan small pulse laser comes to mind, but even the IS pulse laser, which we did touch on in the videos, had a damage nerf and a DPS nerf for no real reason. On the IS one, the clan one was certainly overpowered and needed a tweak, but they just took it way too far. And so they've just, by reducing the cooldowns on all those lasers, after 6 months after, or not even 6 months after, a major energy rebalance, which was supposed to get everything in line, they tried to push through a second energy rebalance, this is the point that really got me. And when we looked through that rebalance, it wasn't a rebalance. It was just a general broad nerfing of every single laser. Now, they did backtrack on this. So to their credit, they listened to the community. I think there must have been a lot of, well, my hunch is there's a lot of pre-order cancels when they released the patch notes for that. Maybe not. I don't know. I'm just guessing. But when I saw a rebalance happen within 6 months of another rebalance on the same weapon system, it rung alarm bells in my head saying, do these guys, they have a good grasp on what's going on in this game? And then since the second rebalance, which was cancelled, we've seen continual nerf to lasers in every single patch bar one since then, I believe. And the medium pulse laser has been targeted a fair bit, and there's been others as well. I'd have to go back and check, but I think in every single patch bar one, they've tweaked energy cooldowns and energy systems. So it seems to me like they're just sneaking that large second rebalance across 6 or 8 months worth of patches, which again, I don't really like. What I'd rather see is to start lifting up some of these other weapon systems to be able to compete with Clan Laser Vomit, and say if you're going to take a large alpha Clan Laser Vomit mech, but another mech happens to close on you or can reduce its exposure time to you, then you're going to pay. I don't feel it like there's a really good counterplay to those lasers. They're just strong in every situation, and because of every other system being nerfed and weapons spread and pinpoint damage being reduced, it's just kind of been the best by default. And I've probably gone on and on. I'm going around in circles, but that's I think part of the problem with lasers in general.
No, you bring up some great points, and also I feel that maybe this has been pushed a little further along the lines of alpha striking with the heavy lasers, considering that they're more damage for less tonnage, so you can pack on a bigger alpha strike and just burn it and hide while you wait for your heat to cool down.
Yeah, and they allow extra heat sinks in as well, because they're obviously lighter tonnage. So not only can you fit more lasers, you can fit more heat sinks, so you cool quickly.
And then you have double cool shots from skill tree too.
Yeah, we can get into that. Maybe a topic we like to talk about is consumables and their spamming that we've seen recently. Like you said, we have people can take double cool shots, which are now stronger than they used to be under the old system, and like they can take double UAVs and double strikes.
No, I don't think double UAVs has been so much of an issue. I think that has been, if anything, a little bit of a buff to light mech, so that they're able to get in a position, scout it out, they get the UAV shot down, then they've got an opportunity to put up another one So I don't think anyone's really complaining too much about the double UAV, although if you run into a team with a lot of LRMs, maybe you are.
No,
I
I can
don't
agree
know.
with that, yeah.
But I think the outliers were the double cool shot and the double strikes. And look, to PGI's credit, they did adjust them. It took a bit of time, but they have adjusted them down. In my mind, they were balanced as they were. There was no need to add a second cool shot and a second strike. I'd rather almost not have that auxiliary tree installed at all. But again, this is getting into detail, and everyone's going to have their own opinions. But to me, there was no need to run an auxiliary tree, to give double strikes, to give double cool shots, to make the cool shots almost twice as strong as what they were before, and then give you two of them on top. Again, it just showed a little bit of a lack of forethought.
So, Dane, have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I agree. I don't want to go again. I want to go down a path that's gonna get a segment of the population upset, because I feel like often that's what happens. You, as Val kind of mentioned earlier, you get everybody knows that something needs to happen, but everybody disagrees about it, and then everybody like tears each other down, and then I feel like PGI can just look at it and go, well, no one can agree on anything, so we don't need to do anything.
We're just leaving it. We're not touching it, and that's it.
Yeah, and that's our ultimate fear of occurring. But just to add, the cool shots is another example of something that is a unintentional, I assume, buff to laser vomit, because it just makes those laser vomit mechs that are putting out those high alpha pinpoint laser damage more viable, as opposed to say an SRM brawling mech. Cool shots doesn't give much advantage to an SRM brawling mech. That's part of the reason you're running is it's a cooler mech. It
was just that another piece of straw thrown onto the bundle. The mechs slowed down, so it took longer for them to get in. The laser vomit mechs had more structure and could shoot you from further away. And then the laser vomit, like the cool shots, allowed you to fire your lasers more often. It was it's just another piece of straw onto the larger bundle, which affected the overall playstyles of a lot of mechs.
So, well, we've talked about a bunch of stuff here. And I believe we've touched on this already in some parts of this. We could do specifically engine desync. We've already pretty much talked about it already, right? But I don't know if you just want to say anything about that.
We have. Yeah, and it's another one that I was absolutely thrilled when they announced they were doing it. And yeah, it's been another one of those things that, much like I mentioned about the skill tree and not going back and touching it and rescale and not touching it, it was introduced with what seemed to me like a bunch of arbitrary values, and they've tweaked some very, very low underperformers and boosted them a little. And the obvious glaring ones like the Nightshare and Mad 2C, which are overperforming, they've bumped them down and nerfed their agility somewhat. But I can't think of a mech that they've actually tweaked the acceleration and deceleration on. Maybe there have been some lights and they've had a little tweak here or there. But for the most part, it was brought in, mechs were given these values, and it's just pretty much remained. And whether or not that suits the mech and what players are trying to do with it in the game now is pretty much been too bad. To me, that doesn't seem like they've touched it again. It's been one of those things, they've implemented it, we've got some things right, we've got a lot of things wrong, and we've just put it to the side and left it there, and we're focusing on something else. Would you agree with that, Dane?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely the sense of it. There's mechs that could, I mean, the Locust could really use some help in that regard, and I think I mentioned that in my video as well. And then there's some other mechs I think that Timberwolf could probably use some help there as well. But I don't want, probably not getting specifics, but it's the kind of thing that needed to be balanced over time, that needed to be played with over time to reach a point where it was better than where they began, and they've just kind of left it by the highway and hope somebody adopts it.
Yeah, there was a point you brought up in your video where basically there's been no real iterative changes of the whole system. There has been a few ups and downs of specific mechs, but the whole ones I remember are things like the Marauder 2C losing and things like that.
It's been the mechs that have been doing really well. They use it as a point to tweak them down. But I think there's a lot of mechs that are performing in those middle sections that the values that were given to their engine desync just don't match them or need tweaks and just little tweaks here and there. I think could really boost some other mechs in those areas. I don't want to go into specifics because everyone's going to have different values, and like that just opening up a whole can of worms. But I feel there's a lot more tweaks that could be done in there, and maybe they are doing that very, 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 very slowly over time. But with a new system introduced, I would have liked to have seen a lot more changes and tweaks done in the first 6 months of that system, rather than just kind of, from my perspective, putting it in and forgetting about it for the most part.
All right. Now, was there any other... Those are sort of the main topics from your video, but was there anything else that maybe missed your video that you wanted to shed some light on?
I'd just like one last comment, which would just be like #stop the nerfs. Just over the last 8 or 9 months, anything that seems to be overperforming slightly just seems to be hit like one of those moles in a whacking mole at a carnival. Anything that pops up, it's a little bit too big, they just keep whacking it down, whacking it down, whacking it down, and eventually every weapon system bar one has been brought down, and that one that hasn't been brought down, they brought down 6 months ago. It just seems like it's balanced by nerfing. I'd really like to see, instead of overperformers being brought down, I'd really like to see some of the weapon systems that are underperforming or that aren't used by the majority of the player base given some buffs and tweaks. I just think the continual nerfing of the weapon systems that people get attached to and have fun with, and they have to find something else, and it feels like they're constantly moving around trying to find something that they like, and what they do like has been changed, it's not as good anymore. Just the length of time that the continual nerfs have been brought out has removed a lot of the fun from the game and added to a general malaise. Again, just my opinion, but I think it resonated with a lot of Dane's viewers, and I think Dane feels, I won't put words in his mouth, he can speak as well, but I think Dane feels the same. But I'd just like to see the nerfs slow down and stop, and maybe start buffing some of these other weapons platforms and mechs.
And Dane?
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty much the story. That's what we're trying to get across to people here. It's we've said it a million times, the specifics don't matter as far as we do. We don't want to get pulled down into a conversation where someone's going to say, "No, the Timberwolf's too good, you're wrong, therefore this whole thing's wrong," or something like that. We just want viable playstyles. We want to bring back the 35-ton lights. We want to bring back the Locust. I mean, I would like to, but again, that's nitty gritty. But we want to bring back brawling. We want to bring back PPC trading, and we want to bring back a lot of DACA styles as well. And just as we've mentioned throughout this video, the things they have done have just compounded to create a situation that's incredibly unfavorable towards those weapon systems. Can you still take them? Sure. Are there a few mechs where, in the right kind of scenario, the right kind of setup, they're almost viable? I mean, sure. Against a random bunch of people you don't know with tiers all over the place and people just falling left and right, wandering around, falling into ditches or whatever. I mean, sure, one of those playstyles can be great, can work out that time. But I mean, in general, everything's working against them and working towards laser vomit. Even though PGI's been trying to nerf it, it's one of those things that just comes to do they see the whole gestalt picture of the way that the environment is evolving around them? And do they get why these weapons are better? It's not because of a number in a spreadsheet specifically. It's because of a lot of things coming together.
Yeah, a whole bunch of non-spreadsheetable ideas about the how those are actually used in the game. There's the positioning, there's the hardpoint locations, whether they're high or not on the mech, and all those sorts of things that are really hard to spreadsheet with just looking at weapon values. That
said, I don't want to, give PGI and the community like a list of here's 100 things that, with each of them requiring 50 man hours or 500 man hours to do, and I want PGI to go home, go to Vancouver, work all night for 3 months and then get these ready for me in 3 days. Like I know we've mentioned a lot. We've mentioned a lot of the reasons why these things are happening, but I do think there are probably a few spreadsheet changes, especially when it comes to buffing, that could mitigate a lot of these things. They don't need to go and redo skill tree from the ground up. They don't need to go and exhaustively do engine desync, resync, or whatever on every single mech. They don't need to go and rescale every mech again. I think there's a few small things they can do that should immediately bring back some of these play styles. And I mean, and we've seen it in things like quirks. Really, quirks, that's essentially what a quirk is. It is a quick change to a number that all of a sudden creates or destroys a play style, that turns a mech into something amazing or turns the mech into something forgettable.
So,
And I
based
yeah,
on
sorry.
that, like based on what you're going here, what would be sort of like your top few, if you could, keep to a, not your top 10 or anything, because that would be way too much information, but your top few things, what would you like to see from PGI for them to do next? Like, what do you want their response to our conversation here and also your video to be?
Well, I say this in my video, and I specifically I want them to talk to Terragato, but I want them to make it fun, and I want them to take what we've said and reevaluate what they're doing and find a way to make it fun again. And I do know specifically Terragato, who I think has done a ton for this community and has been very involved in balance and surveys and stats and basically every level of Q&A you could be for probably longer than anybody else has in this community, and probably to a greater scope than anybody else has in this community. I think if a conversation with him would be great. I think he has some good insights. And I know beyond him, he has been working with a group of other players.
I mean, I'd like to add as well that I don't want to sort of dictate any one item to PGI to fix or anything like that. They have made a good game that's kept me interested for a very long period of time, and it's given me a lot of enjoyment, and I've had a lot of fun with it. I've made some good friends like Dane through it, and I'd like to give them their creative freedom to make the game fun again. But over the last 9 months, things just to me have all just compounded, and everything's been heading in a downward slope. I personally wouldn't want to point out at any one particular thing, but I think everyone's got their own top three as well. It just gets down to personal opinion. But I think PGI have a reasonable idea from all the comments on Dane's video himself. There's lots of figures in the community as well that have great ideas about balance, not just Terragato, but there's a few others out there as well, more than a few that they could look at. There's been that many posts that have kind of gone ignored. There's Salami yourself, who else? Navid. Too many to mention. There's lots of information they can draw on. I'm sure they have a handle on the game. I just like to see some positive changes.
What I don't want to see though, and this is gonna sound maybe counterintuitive, is I don't want a town hall. I don't want a community town hall. I feel like in the past those have been not entirely successful, and I feel like often when they try to include so many people from so many segments of the population, and often it's just optics, like, oh, you're coming from this clan and this clan, and that way you're both represented. But I mean, what are they really representing? I just feel like when they pull from everybody, it's the same reason why we've wanted to avoid specifics throughout this discussion, is that you end up with too much, and too much is nothing.
Yeah,
and we don't want nothing.
It can become a white noise of opinions that becomes difficult to pull out what actually could possibly fix the problem and would make the majority of them happy.
So I don't want a town hall. I don't want PGI to come talk to me. I mean, sure I do. I know, I get the feeling that they might not like me very much, but I've not, I've never been banned, I've never been warned, I haven't ever made anti-PGI material before. I've called them to question. I've called them to I've called out things that I think are going wrong, but the only reason I've ever done anything, the only reason I put any work into any of this is because I want the game to succeed and I want PGI to do the right thing. And sometimes I worry they don't see it, and I'm just trying to get it out there so that they can. I mean, it's not like I make money or anything from these videos.
Yeah,
So,
everything I've seen from you has just been constructive criticism, and there's been no vitriol behind it. Of course, there is some people who do that stuff, and they just, their message is lost when they start being vulgar with it. But yeah, as long as we can keep it up with some good constructive criticism, hopefully we can get some stuff through.
and I try. I try to remind them that I'm not their enemy. I might not be the whitest of knights, because I'm not, but I'm a player that wants, I'm invested in this game succeeding. I've created a unit, I've created a community. We've got, the Isengrim has websites like the Jarl's List. I mean, there's a lot of back end work that we have put into this game. And this game thriving allows us to thrive. Yeah, and more coming, like the Grim Mechs, successor to the Metamechs we're working on. And so we don't want it to go badly, and we don't want PGI to fail and some other company comes in and in 13 years we get a new game. I mean, we want Rust to succeed. We want Paul to succeed. We want Chris to succeed. We want everybody to get famously wealthy and huge. And we want to help them succeed. We want to point out things maybe they're missing, and we want to give them the opportunity to correct them.
All right. Well, unless we got any other points we want to talk about, it sounds like a good mood to end off on. And unless you guys got anything else to talk about?
You know what? We just want to make this game fun again, and we don't want this to be forgotten. We don't want PGI to put out a new press release about a new mech, and then that becomes a conversation, and then nobody's talking about the fact that a lot of people aren't enjoying this game anymore. That's why we came here. That's why we're happy to accept your invitation, and hopefully we can maybe talk to a few more people and keep it going, because I don't want a gesture from PGI. I don't want them to say, "Oh, we talked to Chris today." I want the game to get better.
Yeah, I think all the players of the game want that as well. But yeah, thank you guys so much for spending your time. It was a pleasure for me to do this interview. I really wanted to talk to you as well, and also give your message some signal boost if I can do something about that, and keep it relevant in the conversation so that, like, for example, the Blood Asp that was just announced doesn't push it to the side.
Yes, send it everywhere.
But other than that, thanks so much for watching, and good hunting.
All right, thanks, Kanajashi and everybody else.
Thanks. Live long and prosper.
Genga Alfrek!